Hi, my name is Dan Hawes, and I'm going to share with you a little 3D movie about Zen and the art of creating an animated movie. So we're going to talk a little bit, I'll give you a little bit of my background. We'll talk about the intent of this module, and then a little bit of an overview of the creative process and the production process. So let's get right into it. A little bit about my background. I am a digital media producer of animated TV, film, and games. We've done a number of TV series and movies. Some of the credentials are on screen for you to reference, and I'm also, part of my love is the education market, and I teach at Ryerson in the creative industries portfolio. And my area of research is cognitive priming and virtual reality, and that's part of what the intent is of this particular course module. We're exploring new ways to present and take advantage of technology in virtual reality to create better experiences for you. So the intent of this module, the intent is really threefold. First of all, to entertain and educate. I want to help you understand how an animated movie is made, but also in a fun way. So as we go through the process, hopefully it's an enjoyable process. We want to inform you about what types of activities are important and what's really not that important, where the key focus areas should be, and maybe get you inspired thinking about how you could create your own animated movie. The creative process. I'm going to share with you what a producer does, what a director does, and what a writer does. And in many cases, those functions work hand in hand. They're collaborative, they work together, and sometimes a producer does some directing, and a writer does some directing, and a director does some producing. So those often overlap, but they're very critical, and all those functions have to happen in order to make an animated movie work. So what does a producer do? It starts with imagination. They create an idea or a high concept. They think about what the possible worlds could be like, what if scenarios. They tend to have a vision for how this is going to come together. They think about who the people might be, who the actors might be, what the visuals, what the world might look like. They're really a meta artist, a multidisciplinary artist that pulls together many factions, visual storytelling with directors, written storytelling and user journey with writers and production personnel and finance people who also are very critical in making sure we don't run out of money during the production. They're responsible for creating digital experiences, and more now than ever, everything is digital. The focus has to be on being creative and making something work creatively, as well as using technology to make the visuals compelling and present different ways of telling stories that keep the user interested or the audience interested. They need to be cognizant of the business issues, not just the budgeting, to make sure that this movie gets delivered on budget, on time, but also to make sure it works, that when it gets presented to the audience, that it makes sense, that people aren't losing their shirt. They really have to be good with people because they're dealing with people all the time. It's a multidisciplinary approach, so they need to be able to talk many languages, a language of business, a language of creative, a language of technology. And to some extent, the really good producers create an alchemy, or it's a magic of bringing things together where the whole is truly greater than the sum of the parts. What about a director? What does a director do? Director is focused a little bit more on the specifics of storytelling. They're framing not just the visuals, not just the shot, but also the characters in a scene. They're more hands-on. They're worried about the timing of that storytelling. They take the words from the script and they transform that into a visual story. Much like the producer, they have to be cognizant of the fact that they're creating digital experiences. Everything's digital now. They have to be creatively focused. They have to know what the best type of technology is to use. James Cameron is a perfect example of a director who's always pushing the envelope of both creative and technology, and that's why he is such a great director. More than anything, the director is responsible for creating emotions. If you go to a movie and you leave that movie and you don't feel anything, then the director has failed. The director is most responsible for creating that emotional response in the audience. They're also the coach. They are the person that's on the field right there and then, and making sure that everybody's working in harmony and unison, and in some cases, creating conflict, because that might be what's creatively best to do. And they're trying to create the effect. And the effect obviously ends in an emotional experience, but that's what directors do. What about a writer? Imagination. Writer, director, and producer all have to think. So these are imaginative people that are creating a world and a set of challenges that didn't exist before. Also, the writer, sometimes the writer is the one that comes up with the high concept or the unique idea. They think about the genre. They create the characters. They really are creating the written blueprint of that story and that hero's journey. And with that hero's journey comes an arc, a set of challenges so that the character ends up being more than what they were from the start. At the end of the movie, they generally return back to the start, but they're wiser, and that is a result of the challenges that they face. That is the character arc. Much like the director and the producer, they have to work with people. In many cases, writers work with teams of writers, with producers, directors, and sometimes the lines are very blurry, so collaboration is key in all three of those functions. And the writer is really more the guardian of the story structure. The writer looks at the story structure and says, you know what, based on previous stories and my understanding of story archetypes, like the hero's journey, we're missing something here, and they are the guardian of that experience. Let's start with the inspiration or the idea. What's important in the idea? Everybody at one point in their life has had that epiphany, that idea, that thing that just struck them. Aha! It's that aha moment, that special. There's a high concept of something, or something that you think nobody has ever thought of, an angle, a positioning. That's the high concept. What if something happened? What if all of a sudden the grid went down and the only people that knew how to, revive the grid were grade 7 students because they had a certain type of knowledge. Anyway, you can create any number of scenarios, and that really forms the basis of the starting point for your imagination and exploration. What is the premise? And we'll talk a little bit about genres in a sec, and we'll get a better understanding of premise. Is there irony? Is there conflict? Right? We had a TV series called Chili Beach. In that title, there is irony, because you don't typically associate chili and beach together. They're sort of mutually exclusive concepts, so it creates a sense of irony. Conflict. You cannot have a story if there's no conflict. It's really not only is it not wise, it's just there is no story, so nobody's going to sit and watch something. Fish out of water. That's a really funny scenario. Somebody who just doesn't fit, who's in an environment and trying to make the best of the situation. Inspector Clouseau is a total fish out of water. Everything that he does is, completely out of context. The character-driven journey. Is there a journey in there? What is the character going through? What kind of challenges is he or she facing? In the book Save the Cat, they talk about 10 genres. And a genre is really just a model for categorizing movies and stories. They talk about monster in the house, golden fleece, out of the bottle, dude or dudette with a problem, rites of passage, buddy love, why done it, the fool triumphant, institutionalized, and superheroes. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those. Some of them are intuitive, and you can instinctively figure out what movies fit those domains, but let's quickly talk about it. Monster in the House, we've all seen Monster in the House movies. Jaws was the classic, Aliens, Tremors, Jurassic Park is a Monster in the House movie. There's a space that you cannot escape from, and there's a risk of a horrible death for all. Very simple concept. It evokes primal emotion, fear, and anticipation, and these movies are very successful and tend to be tentpoles. Golden Fleece, Star Wars, Wizard of Oz, Back to the Future. These are user journey movies. These are where the hero travels from one point in his development to another point, faces all sorts of obstacles, and in the end becomes victorious. And it's based on the mythology of Jason and the Argonauts. And most heist movies have this genre. Out of the bottle. I think most people know what that's about. Aladdin is the classic out of the bottle. It usually starts with a wish, And that wish propels that hero into a set of challenges that they're forced to face. And at some point they realize that magic is not everything, and they can be more of a human being, they can grow, they can develop, they can accomplish what they want actually without the magic. And that's part of the out of the bottle formula. Dude or dudette with a problem. This is really a case of an ordinary person with extraordinary circumstances. These are huge primal problems that the user has no desire to face, but they're just unable to avoid it. Schindler's List, Terminator, Titanic, Die Hard. It's usually something that the user is stuck with and they have to figure it out. Rites of Passage. Best example of Rites of Passage, very funny movie, 40-Year-Old Virgin. It's a tough one, but it's basically a particular time in somebody's life when they have to face some challenge, some fear, some obstacle. They must slay the proverbial dragon. Obviously that's a metaphor, but they must face something that has been an obstacle to change in their life. Buddy love. Buddy love is every love story ever told, but it can be a buddy movie, it could be a love story, Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Wayne's World. Really all about people working together to solve a problem, and as a result of that journey together, they end up becoming closer. And it could result in love, it could result in bromance, you call it. Why Done It? Knives Out is a really great Why Done It that was released last year. Most UK murder mysteries really have that sense of why done it. You'll often get a sense that there's murder, there's greed, but and you get a sense of who did it, but you just don't know why. And part of it is uncovering that story underneath. The Fool Triumphant, one of my favorite genres. Elf, Tommy Boy, Happy Gilmore, Wreck-It Ralph. This is a genre that audiences love. It's really where the underdog is painted with a number of challenges, and in the end they win the day over horrible obstacles and evil oppressors. Institutionalized. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Crazy People. Really the user is locked away and the hero must adapt to a new environment. They must learn and grow and solve a problem. And superhero genre. We've seen way too many of these, the Avengers, Incredibles, Spider-Man, Batman, you name it. If it has a comic book, it's a superhero. It's the opposite of dude with a problem. It's extraordinary dude or dudette in an ordinary world, but with a horribly evil nemesis. So, let's think about the log line. We've thought about what the genre is that our movie might fit into. What makes a good log line? Well, it turns out that because people don't want to waste a lot of cognitive energy, you want to minimize the confusion or cognitive strain. You want to make it simple and easy to understand. You want to build on an existing frame of reference. You want to have an adjective to describe the hero and an adjective to describe the bad guy. And in the end, there has to be a compelling goal. There has to be a reason for this movie to be made. Not just good guy, bad guy, but the good guy has to be working towards something, and the bad guy has to be in his way or trying to achieve something that obstructs that. So here are some example log lines that you might know. A lion cub, Crown Prince, is tricked by a treacherous uncle into thinking he's caused his father's death, and he flees into exile and despair, only to learn in adulthood that his identity and his responsibilities are here where they started. In order to power the city, monsters have to scare children so that they scream. However, the children are toxic to the monsters, and after a child gets through, two monsters realize things may not be what they think. Definitely a learning experience for the children and for the monster. So those are two example log lines that don't make people think too much, but catch their attention. So we have a concept that I wanted to share with you. We're working on an animated series concept. It's a high concept called Parallel Parker.
Hi, I'm Parker. While you're watching scenes from my graphic novel, soon to be web series, let me tell you why the fate of the universe and stuff depends on me. Here are some things I am. 11, spunky, and resourceful. Some things I'm not. A super genius, a daredevil, or popular. Not even a little. Not in this universe, anyway. But there's loads of other parallel universes, And every one of them has a Parker who's just like me, but totally not me. There's a super genius Parker, and a fashionable Parker, and a mermaid Parker. There's a pirate Parker, and a robot Parker, and a daredevil Parker. See, one day this girl who looked like me showed up out of nowhere and just handed me a cell phone. I don't know why she gave it to me, but I'm guessing it probably has something to do with all the parallel universes splorking together. See, some supervillainy guy is cramming whole universes into weird little hypercubes, and sooner or later, they're gonna make everything go kablooey. So somebody has to hop between the universes and collect those little hypercubes and stop him before he wrecks everybody's party. And that somebody is me. Good thing there's an infinite number of me, with every kind of skill and talent you can think of. Maybe we'll figure out the whole school thing while we're at it.
So the story challenge. Whoever our hero is, they really have a choice. They can choose comfort, or they can choose purpose. And if you'll notice in Toy Story, Woody always faces that. Does he sort of follow his purpose as a toy, or does he take the easy path? In our case, Parker is going to have an easy path, which is avoiding the conflict, living comfortably in her world where she's a preteen, and maybe taking advantage of some of the really neat things of having a multiple universe. Or does she become a warrior and help save the world? Ultimately, for the story to proceed, your main character will choose the path of more resistance, because without that path, there is no challenge, no conflict. A lot of these stories have the same basic fundamentals. It starts off with the once upon a time. The journey usually starts off with a character who's basically an underdog character. Cinderella is essentially working as a maid. She's oppressed by her evil stepmother. Harry Potter, similar. He does have unique skills, but he's basically oppressed and living with Muggle family members. They all seem to have a few close friends that are also social outcasts. So there's a group of people that tend to share that misery. But they still exist within that miserable environment until some evil element comes along and starts to make their world, however limited it is, even worse. And they're forced to challenge it. Star Wars is a good example. Most of these characters resist. As part of the hero's journey, they tend to resist this. They tend to be comfortable until the point where they have to take up arms and challenge and fight the villains. And in the end, whether they use a ring, whether they use their Batman capabilities, whether they use magic like Harry Potter, they use what they have to defeat the hero and live happily ever after. And that is probably characteristic of almost every journey that a hero will take in, whether it's animated film or even, live action film. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the genres, a tagline. We've talked about sort of some of the story elements and the hero's journey and what needs to be considered in coming up with that story idea. Let's talk a little bit about the production process. The first question you have to ask yourself is, do I want to present this in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions? 2D versus 3D. 2D requires you to draw the world. 3D requires you to create the world. There's an order of magnitude more challenge in doing 3D than doing 2D. There are also additional areas of expertise, including setting up a software pipeline, modeling characters and worlds, rigging, texturing, lighting, rendering, visual effects. I'm getting tired just thinking about it. It's a lot more expensive, it's a lot more challenging, and any one of those areas, if they are deficient, can make it bad, can make your movie less than it needs to be. So here's an example, The Lion King. The original Lion King, I think, was done for about $20 million. The new Lion King, and you'll notice that the framing is pretty similar. The characters and the setup are similar, but the cost of that world is about $200 million on the right, and on the left, it's a fraction of that. The storytelling is pretty much the same if you've seen both of them. The story really just talks about that hero's journey of Simba and Nala, but it's told in a much richer world with the new Lion King. So with our character, Parallel Parker, we used 2D design as our chosen method. We just felt that 3D design, we could evolve to that at some point, but given our budget constraints, 2D was the way to go. So we actually did our own little comic book where we told a story where Parker had to save the universe and cheat on her math exam while she was doing it, but she did actually help save the universe, so that was all good. So here was some look development that we had. It's a little visual of what the characters look like in 2D, and they were designed for the comic book, but they'll be used in our 2D version. And I'm just going to show you about 30 seconds of this. Here's another one called Pizza. This was a concept that we're working on right now, and you can see in this visual the example of 2D and 3D working side by side. As we visualize the 2D, we turn it into 3D, and it started to inform how we were visualizing and imagining the world. So this is another one that gives you a sense of some of that thinking that goes on early in the development process. Pixar is the gold standard for production. So if you want to study a company that does production, Pixar is the gold standard. And Ed Catmull, who was one of the co-founders of Pixar and the president, has a book called Creativity Inc. I highly recommend it. It tells you the story from early concept, evolution of Pixar, right to the final development of some of their most successful animated movies. And you get a sense of what the issues are and what the challenges are and how they evolve as a company to meet them. So their process involves a lot of iteration. That's what I can say. It's not magic. They try to push the envelope on the types of rendering, the types of lighting, how they do animation, how they tell stories. They push the envelope and they iterate and they iterate and they iterate. And a movie could cost $200 million to do, but when it hits the screen, it's been done probably 5 times, and they've had input from many different angles. I guess in short, it's a very intricate, collaborative process of people working together to create something. So I guess I'd put it back to you. Knowing what you know now, do you think you could create an animated movie? And if you did, what would your story be? Thank you very much.